Chapter 15. Neighbors gathered to observe the damage to the road. Even though it was in such a state that no vehicle could get through, we all felt a sense of relief because the washout, located between the two entrances to Arlo's property, afforded a detour. To illustrate the point, a car came up the road, entered Arlo's lower driveway, drove around his circular drive up almost to the barn, and then exited out the upper entrance. One of them city folks, no doubt. We went home feeling better. But by the next day, when I set out to drive the kids to school, we discovered, to our amazement, that Arlo had barricaded his entrances. Not lightly with little sawhorses, but with his big red farm truck at one entrance and his tractor at the other. Had we been chastised by the Lord? Had we been too flippant in our bedtime prayers involving our other great need? Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, forget about the phone. That didn't mean we hadn't been fervent. What I came to realize, though, was that I should have been more specific. I should have petitioned the Lord for a less dramatic occasion to answer our prayer than the day the neighbors decided that to avoid more washouts in the upper section of the road, we should buy gravel and rent a grader. About the only neighbors not out shoveling gravel that day were the Biastocks, who were observing the Sabbath. The only exception was their son Jack, who said that although he was allowed to attend a work party, he wasn't allowed to work. He, therefore, spent the time flirting with Freya and torturing Eric. The only other one not out shouldering a shovel was Sig, still sore from his accident. By all rights, I should have been exempt too because of my burnt hands and blackberry-pricked arms and legs, but I felt obligated. A bone of contention had built up among the neighbors as to how to split the financial burden. Those at the top of the road figured they should pay the least. Those with passenger cars figured they should pay less than trucks. Those who drove trucks didn't say anything. Trucks had become a dirty word. Thus far, Corey footed the bill because we felt the wrath directed at us due to our frequent use, moving tons of household items, lock, stock, and jingle bells, plus tons of Corey's equipment, lock, stock, and skis. It made me wish I had my brush salesman back to listen to my troubles. We were hard at work. I was doing my best to think positively, but Paul Robeson's famous rendition of Old Man River kept surfacing. Tote that barge, lift that bale, get a lil drunk, and you lands in jail. Suddenly, a huge truck appeared on the horizon. "What the hell?" said Jack. I was shocked that he was allowed to swear on the Sabbath. Didn't he see the travel at your own risk sign at the top of the road? Sure, he saw the sign, said a smart Alec kid who had appeared out of nowhere and was loafing on the sidelines. But he's, traveling at, his own, risk? Looks like one of them cattle haulers, like the one that brought your horse, Freya, said Jack. Don't tell me you got another horse? Arlo, whom everyone now looked upon as the neighbor most likely to receive the Unpopular Neighbor Award, had come by to scoff at us because we were taking over the county's job. Now the county would never come out and take care of its responsibilities. You could have at least waited until you got good fence. Freya said, "We're not getting another horse." When the huge truck got halfway down the hill, the good neighbors became unraveled. If he gets stuck, we'll never get out. Everyone began frantically waving it back, but it continued swaying and bucking down the hill. The men headed up to meet it. The driver leaned out the window. "Can any of you guys tell me where Corey Gus' stiff son lives?" I headed for the ditch, ready to jump in. "Yeah, he's right here, and if you ask him, he can tell you where he lives," yelled Jack flippantly. The smart Alec kid had evidently spotted the company logo on the truck. "It says the phone company." I shouted, "Hallelujah," and held back on my dive. Everybody else shouted, "Damn." But the truck couldn't be stopped. Ma Bell's boys had their orders. They spent the day climbing poles and stringing cable. Most of the neighbors went home to watch the football game on TV, except for Jack and the smart Alec kid. They stayed and told the phone men how to string cable. "It goes, like you know. The truck didn't get stuck until it was trying to turn around in Mr. B's orchard. We watched a phone man take out a phone and hook it up to some wires and call for a tow truck. By the time it arrived, Sig had hobbled out. I yelled at him, "Don't you get near those trucks!" After a big tussle, the driveway was messed up, but surprisingly, the big ruts diverted the water away from our cesspool. I told Corey it served Mr. B right. As promised, we had a 4-party line. Every family member wanted to use it, so the competition was fierce. When it finally came to my turn, I didn't have to stop and consider. I called the feed and seed to see if they had chicks. They did. So the kids and I jumped in the car, and off we went. I felt guilty about using the road for what some folks might call a frivolous adventure, but since it wasn't the Sabbath, I said, what the hell? We fell in love with every chick in the store. At last, we settled on a dozen Parmenter Reds. When we got them home, I sat down to read the country bulletin, which stated that baby chicks should be watched carefully. I was determined to go by the book. I couldn't see myself running to the barn every 5 minutes just to watch. So I did what I figured the pioneer women did. I put them in a cardboard box in the kitchen, where I could hover over them and still turn the meatballs without having to cross a threshold. Watching was akin to looking into a horse's mouth. I had no clue. So I merely observed their general activities, eating, sleeping, and pecking at each other. I wondered if they were doing too much or too little of any one thing, and if they were or weren't, what I was supposed to do about it. When Arlo came to pick up the milk jug, he made the dumb city female gesture and pointed out the errors in my program. Firstly, if I was going in for eggs, I should have bought all pullets. Second, I should have bought a white breed, as they were better layers. Third, if I was going to bother with chickens at all, I might as well have bought enough to make it worth the bother. I gave him the "so who do you think you are" Einstein gesture and handed him the jug. When Corey came in, it was, "Phew, what's that awful smell?" I knew he didn't mean the meatballs. I repeated Arlo's comments. He responded, "Stay with the red. A mixed flock looks like a bunch of culls." I called Mama and she came down. When she saw how well the chickens were doing, she was enthused. "Let's go and get some more." "But Mama, I thought you didn't like chickens." "I don't, but you do, so come on." Mama and the boys oohed and awed at every pen. I was disappointed when they didn't have any chicks the age of our first batch, but they had other batches. "Me want black ones," Eric said. "Daddy said to stick to the same color," I said. "But the black ones are cuter," Sig whined, pointing with his bad arm. Mama prided herself on never interfering in our lives, but that didn't exclude philosophical comments. "Franny, a little variety is stimulating. It's only the addition of a few breadcrumbs that makes potatoes au gratin appealing." I didn't know what that had to do with chickens, so I ignored her. But I shouldn't have. She went over and bought a dozen black chicks. I felt guilty, but figured I'd tell Corey that I couldn't tell my mother what to do. But just in case, I bought another dozen 3-day-old Parmenter Reds. When we got to the car, Sig spotted 2 baby ducks in the window. "Mom, you're always telling us about the ducks you had when you were little. Why can't we have—" Mama was quicker than I was. "You know, Franny, ducks are so good at eating slugs." "Boy, we've got lots of slugs," Sig said. "Boy, we got schlugs," Eric echoed. "Would you boys take good care of them?" Mama asked. She had come to the conclusion that I wanted ducks, so she opened her purse and took out 50 cents. Sig leaped eagerly out of the car, but Eric lagged behind. "But Mom, dat duck would be onesome." Mama opened her purse again. When the boys came out with their ducks, Mama said, "Freya needs a duck too." When the boys came out with 3 ducks, they looked sad. "There's only 1 duck left, and the lady said we could have him for half price," Sig said. Mama handed out the price of a half-price duck through the window, and I started the car. I had barely assembled the chicks into what I hoped would be one happy family, when the boy chicks started fighting the girl chicks. The black chicks started fighting the red chicks. The old chicks started fighting the young chicks. I threw up my hands. Mama said, "Franny, you need a vacation." I could only laugh. She must have known I was going to say I couldn't afford it. She said, "You can't afford not to. Remember what the doctor said about mental upsets.